All right, and we have Malcolm Maori, the Member of Parliament from Igembe North constituency. Karibu sana to the show.
Yes.
Muthiora Kariara, a former running mate of a presidential election. He's a former Deputy President's candidate. Karibu sana to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Indeed, and Anthony Oloch, the Member of Parliament for Muthiora constituency. Karibu sana to the show. And of course, we want to begin with the matter census that we have been conducting since Saturday night, and we have heard from the leaders that have been speaking about it. That is President Uhuru Kenyatta, opposition leader Raila Odinga, as well as Deputy President William Ruto. They've been speaking about it, and every other Kenyan who has been enumerated has been speaking about it. We'll be taking a roll call to see how many of the panelists have been enumerated so far. But let's listen into what the leaders had to say when they were enumerated on Saturday night.
I can assure you it is painless. I've gone through it. Some of the questions or the questionnaire may be long, but none of the questions are irrelevant. They are all relevant. They are all necessary towards enabling your national government, towards enabling your county governments to be able to plan in a manner that has maximum effect and impact on your respective lives.
Accurate information is central to any planning and any development. I hope that every Kenyan will step forward to be counted and to be enumerated and to answer whatever other questions that the enumerators will be asking as accurately as they can.
Whatever is going to come out of this exercise is going to inform planning and development for the next 10 years. That's the reason why the government has been appealing to people, and I want to add my voice to that of the government and other people who have urged Kenyans to participate in this exercise.
No doubt that the census obviously is an important part of planning for the country. But when you look at the process that has been going on, first of all, have you been enumerated? I begin with you, Anthony Lodge.
Not yet. I obeyed the instructions from Matiang'i, stayed home for 2 days, watched Liverpool, and they were beaten by Liverpool versus Arsenal. We were beaten Manchester City by the other team, Crystal Palace. I stayed home. They didn't turn up.
Muthiora?
They're to get to my home. Hopefully, perhaps before the close of business today, they will.
Your neighbors?
But, yeah, I've seen them. They've come so close to where I stay, but they're yet to get to my home.
Okay.
So I'm hoping they will not lose steam before the day is run out.
And yourself, Mheshimiwa Mauka?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Yes.
Zinzi, have you been enumerated?
No, have you?
No.
Honey?
So, really?
But it appears they've been to all the big houses in Karen, State House.
No, you didn't say that.
You said your neighbors have already been counted.
Yes.
What do they feel about the process?
Well, they are excited. Like yesterday, people were just outside waiting for the enumerators to get to them. So the excitement is out there. People want to participate in the process, which is a good thing.
Were they concerned with the questions that were being asked?
It's a little disturbing because the relevance of some of the questions is not something some people are comfortable about. Like some people are asking, why does the government need to know my ID number when they have this data? Why do they need my phone number? It suffices to just ask if I own a phone or perhaps how many lines do I have? Why do they have to get my phone number? But then, of course, a lot of people are glad to be participating in this civic exercise.
Civic duty.
Yes.
And of course, it's interesting that out of the table of 5, none has been enumerated, but the exercise continues until the 31st of August. But when you look at exactly that point of getting the data on whether you've been registered with Huduma number, what your ID number is, and people are trying to sort of make it a big issue, is it as big as people are trying to make it, or is it just a question of procedure that the government needs to know if indeed you have an ID number, what exactly is your ID number?
I think it looks a little bit disturbing, but I think there may be a point for it. For example, if you ask you, do you own a phone? the next question, what is your phone number, may help the government plan and be able to tell how many people have phones which are unregistered. You remember, the government collects taxes, there are issues about security, and we really need to know. I mean, it helps government to know, out of 10 million people, if you own phones and only 5 million have registered, that informs what steps the government needs to take in terms of policy, in terms of tightening the kind of administrative things that we do. I think somewhere I read in the newspapers that, you know, nearly 100% of Kenyans own phones, and that's very interesting. If 100% of Kenyans own a phone, why is it perhaps that maybe only 60%? There may be some policy issues there. So it may sound a bit disturbing. I know I saw people saying, why do you need to know my ethnicity? For political reasons and many other reasons, the government may need to know demographics in terms of where do you come from. If you come from Western, it may look like it's politically instigated, but sometimes there may be a point why they're asking these questions. Yeah.
Well, Honorable Maoka, let me come to you. Let me rope you into the conversation. When it comes to phone numbers, IDs, even passport numbers, a few individuals, or should I say even organizations such as human rights as well as civil groups, feel as if certain numbers shouldn't have been framed in this year's census, given when it comes to collection of personal data, we don't even have a data protection bill, or rather it's there, but it hasn't been passed into law.
I think I would appeal to Kenyans over this matter to ignore the civil society or the human rights.
But personal data in 2019 is a big deal.
Yes, but I'm saying when we are collecting that data, you look for a mechanism of securing it and making sure nobody is able to access it who is unauthorized. That should be our main. It is actually in the amendment 2016, the protection of the data. Now, when we were entering into this 60th census exercise, we are informed by 5 previous exercises from 1969, 79, 89, 209, and now we are 2019. And when the exercise of Huduma number took off some 4 months ago, it was kind of a preliminary, just to check who is it we are with. And in the Huduma number capture, it is different from the census of a cow. The cattle you have, or the goats, or the camels.
Right.
They were capturing the biometric, fingerprints and the facial.
So are you telling Kenyans that they don't need to be worried that their personal data is safe with the Kenyan government? It will not be going anywhere else? It
is safe. For now, it is safe. Number one. Number two, they should not worry when they are asking your data at home about the ID number that you have there and about the phone number, the Huduma number. That is exactly what we went through in 2009.
But as a legislator,
2009, we under crisis of regions that were accounted and they had fictitious figures. And when you tell them to correct or even go to court or repeat, they rush to court to block it.
Honorable Maoka, as a legislator, as a lawmaker seated on this table, the fact that we're having this census using digital devices to collect personal data for the census, without a data protection bill, Kenyans still would feel that this is not in the interest of Kenyans. Surely if it was in the interest of Kenyans, wouldn't have Parliament have done the necessary by cushioning and making sure that personal data laws are there to protect Kenyans?
I thought there is an Act 2016.
Well, nevertheless, at the end of the day, it's still the data protection bill.
There are those who feel it is not adequate. So now that we have this data has been collected, it is a matter for them to agitate and seek for it to be made secure.
Okay, all right. And of course, there's an explanation from the government that they're saying that their aim of doing all this to collect the ID numbers, excuse me, is to ensure that they're able to weed out fake identities or also people who may have registered probably as refugees and at the same time as Kenyan citizens. So even as that continues, there are those concerns that we've heard of insecurity situations. For instance, in Kisumu, there's that enumerator who was gang raped. There are some others suspects that were masquerading as enumerators in Homa Bay County. I was at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport on Saturday night, and you could see the challenges of enumerators getting to interact with the travelers. Most of them were actually not counted. So it leads to the question of a process that is sort of insecure, but at the same time, it may not have reliable data. What do you think KNBS and the government ought to have done to ensure that some of these challenges that are being experienced are not experienced? And what can they do for the remaining 6 or so days?
First of all, I think the incident about the lady who was gang raped, and I think there was another who was bitten by a dog. I think there are issues that deal with security. I think the security is absolute, but it's security both ways. Remember, Kenyans also are worried about people being able to come masquerading as census people and getting into their houses. So that question goes both ways. The issue about how they managed it, I wish, for example, they had a 24-hour curfew where people simply just stayed home, maybe over Saturday and Sunday, so you limit the movement. Because I saw on the highway leading towards Naivasha, Nakuru Road at night, you know, I mean, can you imagine if I had the president saying the kind of questionnaire is very long? Can you imagine 10 people being told to get out of a car or getting a questionnaire, and you have to do that for hundreds of cars? I think they ought to have perhaps said everybody stay home, maybe put in more enumerators so that you inconvenience people for just 2 or 3 days, so that we don't have this kind of lockdown. It's a temporary lockdown of business, of movements, and other things. So I think that should have been taken care of over and about the security concerns. But I also just wanted to rope in again the issue of the IDs. I think there is a data protection law that is coming up, one that is brought by the majority leader. I think there is one that has been brought by the Senate. I sit on the ICT committee, and we are currently doing public participation. We've gone to, like, I think 6 or so counties at the moment. It is a legitimate concern. But even as we do it, government processes cannot stop. Remember that the porous borders in northeastern province led to, quote unquote, inflation of numbers that perhaps were not justified.
Is it just the northeastern that did that, or even the other regions?
It is very possible, but northeastern was the most prominent that stuck out, because you remember this case went to court, up to the Court of Appeal. You're perhaps talking about funds and resources that were locked down that may not have been justified, and that's very interesting. And then also we should remember, even as we talk about data protection and the concern, that it's government asking you for this data, and you go to M-Pesa and leave you without even blinking. You go deposit money and you ask, what's your ID? And you don't know what the M-Pesa agent is going to do about that. So we talk about data protection, but at the same time, these processes also must go on.
And Muthiora, even as you respond to the 2 issues that have been raised, when a citizen, a private citizen, is sharing this data, people have become so skeptical in this country. Is there any justification? Because you hear some say that the government is sort of coming up with a database of everything that you own. Then after that, they can start to track you. Even you recall the politics of the Huduma number. People are afraid that once you get all this information, you're able to now monitor each and every transaction they make, and sort of exposing yourself to what government can do with what you own?
What's happening in the nation right now is that citizens are more aware today than they were before, and I'm glad they are asking the questions that they are asking. What hurts a developing nation like Kenya often is not the lack of adherence to the rule of law, but sometimes we're just too obedient to the government and the rules and regulations that they give us.
Is it a mistake?
It's not a mistake, but then we need to get value for whatever resources, time, money that we are investing in our processes. Take, for instance, I just mentioned 2 issues before, but then in this era where I should be judged by the content of my character and not by my tribe, why does the government ask what tribe I am from? Now, another thing we need to really challenge is this idea where we accept every bogus explanation that's given to the government. We live in Kenya.
You call it bogus?
Yes, because when they say that you providing an ID number is going to help me weed out people who are not nationals, people with fake ID cards. These people went through the same process that we all go through. So if they want to do something, let them do it right. Let's not waste time on issues that will not add value. And sometimes when they don't get it right, let them go back to the drawing board and get it right so that we save on time and resources. Like you have had, the questionnaire is very long. We could have had more relevant questions.
Why do you feel they're irrelevant questions? Because, I mean, they're asking of who you are, the size of your family, what you own, what you do for life. Why would you say that is irrelevant?
Okay, to begin with, as much as there are other processes that the government is working on, there is information they already have about the population. Take, for instance, if they had proceeded to provide the Huduma numbers like they had promised immediately after the exercise. This is information that the enumerators would have when they were coming on site. So when I identify myself, some of this information would just load up and they wouldn't need to ask most of the questions they are asking right now. But now they spend time on information they already have. So that's why I'm saying
it's a waste of time.
Yeah, no, it's not entirely a waste of time because there is value in providing all the data that's required. But then we could have done better in this exercise given the advancement in technology, the data that the government already has, and just looking at the way that Kenya is at the moment.
Right. Honorable Maura, let me also rope you into this. The other aspect of the census that is currently being carried out, a lot of Kenyans were questioning the directive that came from Dr. Matiang'i on the sense of closing businesses. A lot of Kenyans felt that that was more of a directive, more rather of a statement, and that there's no law around it, and that he should have probably rethought that around it, because given where we are as a country, it wasn't a state of emergency for us to have to close down our businesses. Do you also agree?
No, I think the businesses that we found targeted are actually social joints for entertainment in the evening. Now here you are asking Kenyans to assemble in their homes and be ready for the exercise. And then you open an outlet which can actually hold a majority of them. You defeated the purpose.
So you don't think that the closing of our businesses during this past 48 hours rather was infringing to people's rights?
No.
But why do we need it? The country wasn't in a state of emergency for us to have a shutdown for 48 hours.
No, it was not an emergency because they have not arrested anybody who has been loitering around. That is an emergency. But for the alcohol joints, it was necessary because people, once they get there, first you cannot have enumerators in the bars. You would expect these members, their families are waiting for them to participate in the exercise. Again, this is an exercise that's just a week in 10 years. Surely we should be able to fulfill that civic duty.
Yeah. Of course, it's debatable. There are those who are arguing that businesses have their own right to continue transacting. A weekend is very critical for such businesses. But you had Anthony Oloch say that he obeyed the order to stay at home, yet he was not enumerated. And we want to begin by looking at what you've been saying on Twitter as well as on SMS line, I believe, 22422. Let's start with Twitter. At Citizen TV Kenya, the hashtag to use is Daybreak, so that you can tell us what you think about the census 2019. If we have the first tweet, that is Sam Oindi says that how I wish the same zeal the government used during Huduma number and is using for census would have been used to combat menace of corruption. All right, still this on Twitter, in Nigeria, Lazaro, good morning. You say the kind of questions from the enumerators is a clear indication that government may use Huduma number to introduce new digital taxation that might include even school-going children. All right, so those are just some of the concerns that they have. You can also text us your views. If you've been enumerated, what was the experience? How many questions are you asked? How much time did they take in your household? And were you satisfied with the exercise? Let's get back to the conversation. We were talking about the questions that are being asked, including ethnicity. In 2009, it was such a big issue. A few Kenyans decided they were not going to reveal their ethnicity. And Muthiora Kariara, you're not very warm about that question. So when they come to your house and they ask you your ethnicity, what will be your response? Because I'm required to provide that information, I will. But as I have made it clear, I'm protesting that. But this is a duty I have to do as a citizen. So I will go on and provide all the information that they need. So what is so wrong in declaring what your ethnicity is to the government? How is that going to inform resource allocation without dividing Kenyans along ethnicity?
For instance, if we find at the end of the day that we have more Luyas than Kikuyus, are we going to allocate more resources to Luyas than to Kikuyus? But is that a challenge of asking the innocent question, or is it just the bad manners of politics and politicians? Because at the end of the day, the explanation that the Kenya National Bureau of Standards will give is that it's a cultural issue, that as a country you need to know that we have this many communities, these are the numbers, but not for the misuse by politicians. The reality is that this information is going to be abused for political gain eventually. So it would have served us better if such divisive information was not included in the census exercise, because at the end of the day, we know that the information being gathered in this census exercise will be abused. I can say that with certainty. So what we should have done from the very beginning in the formulation of this process, we should have put safeguards that ensure should this information end up in the wrong hands, it will not be used to derail the process of healing Kenya, making it a cohesive nation. Okay. Before I come to you, Mheshimiwa Maukamore, I want to begin with you, Anthony Oluoch. And so he has his own concerns about the ethnicity being declared, and they say that globally it is a requirement that you need to know whether it's race or the ethnicity of a nation. So what do we do to the political reality that we deal with, despite the fact that we need that data on ethnicity?
I think your ethnicity in this country has been looked at negatively because of the manner in which people have viewed ethnicity and how it has been used negatively. But I think if you look at it from census worldwide and the practice there, when you asked your race, it is not because somebody wants to blacklist the black people or the Hispanics. For example, in the US, you probably want to know who are the Hispanics, who are the Jews, who are the what. It helps you to be able to have the important demographics and how you plan around them. In this country, there are certain tribes who say they have been lost somewhere in the big matrix. And knowing the Nshoms and the Subas and the small tribes here and there helps us to be able to know. And I think recently we even enumerated, or rather gave recognition to a 43rd tribe, which was the Indians. So that helps us to be able to profile in a positive way how we deal with these communities.
Positive, definitely, but Honorable Oluoch, what America does not have is what we Kenyans had in 2007.
Yes.
So given the country's history, for example, if this was Rwanda, would we be asking that question given the country's history? So this being Kenyan, what we saw in 2007, is that something we should be asking?
Well, I know you're not going to sweep away the tribe just because of what happened. I think we need to take the positive sides of our ethnicity and then move forward with it. For example, you asked many other questions. Would you be sensitive about being asked your gender? Because then you say, why are you going to discriminate me on gender basis?
Right.
There's all manner of things you would say based on if you ask me this and didn't ask me that. There's somebody who say, don't ask me my religion, because if I say I'm Muslim, you're probably going to profile me because I'm Muslim. So there's always going to be somebody who will say something. Why pick on ethnicity? We've been asked about religion, you've been asked about gender, you've been asked about you Kenyan binational, you've been asked many, many, many things. And me, I think, in spite of the history about the negative ethnicity, it's important for planning. And look at it even on the basis of this. We are even getting to the level now we are actually getting to count intersex people. So at some point, are you going to say you're asking me my sex orientation because you're going to discriminate me or not give me a job? I don't think that's a positive way of looking at it.
Even though it's important to know that intersex and sexual orientation are totally different. But nevertheless, Mheshimiwa Maukamore, so we see a situation where there are all these concerns that people are suspicious of the government. So even as the census continues for the remaining days, what do we do as a people and on the side of the government to ensure that this sort of suspicion that is always there in such particular times that you are enumerating people when you are registering for Huduma number, how do you ensure that it's not there? So that, yes, as you move forward as a country, that you take forward, you've heard the leaders say we are taking the country forward in terms of getting the numbers. How do you do that without the suspicion that there is?
I think what has happened is that among the elite, or those who are able to be infiltrated by the civil society, are the ones who are creating doubt about the presence of a huge amount of data in the hands of they don't know who. And that one, they are raising concerns about it. But if you are to ask them for a solution, they would tell you, we need to collect data for nearly 50 million people, and that data has to be collected. And in most cases, you know, some countries, in the modern countries, whether Europe or China or US, they have moved a step further to put in even on the streets those facial recognition cameras. Those who are making noise now about their data in a place where they are told it is the government, when that data comes in, what do they do?
But you see, that some of the nations that you mentioned, they are not the most democratic. So the question then is, even as people raise questions that you may not agree with, how do you ensure that that suspicion is not there? Because at the end of the day, these are questions being raised by Kenyans.
Now, you know, the only way to stop their suspicion is to remove that feature.
Is it?
Now you can't remove, you need it. It is actually, like now this census, the difference between it and the others who are just capturing the numbers. You meet unakuta mtu anakuambia I have 14 children in the house. So you now start going into the details. You don't even want to know how somebody who has been married maybe for 7 years has 14 children in the household. Because that's what happened.
Let me now talk let me be the devil's advocate here. I think there are those who are thinking that this is also the politics of 2022 and ethnic mobilization, which will come into place. I mean, at some point, there's going to be realignments and coalitions and people planning how to run the 2022 elections. And speaking from, people who probably be arguing that, is that it would be important to know, for example, and that's why people from Western are very up and agitated and saying, please come and register in Western Province, so that come 2022, people will be arguing that, you know, as Western Kenya, we have now gone to 5 million. As Nyanza Province, we are X number of millions. So if you're going to bargain, and I don't know if this is true, and this is a story, I think it's probably in Kalonzo Musyoka's book, when they was to sit with William Ruto and the president right now, I think they looked at his ethnicity and told him, you cannot bargain for the number 2. So I don't know if these political undertones are also inside of all this, that at the bottom of all this question about your ethnicity is to plan how 2022 and the ethnic equation and numbers play out.
Nevertheless, before we move on, I just want to get your thoughts on the fact that this census, the numbers, the data, the information that is being collected for Kenyans, how will it be used for political gain?
For political gain, it's very simple. I mean, you're going to a situation where no one political party will be able to be in the presidency. You've seen, and I know we are coming to this discussion, what I hear the presidents to be saying is that we want to get away completely from this winner-take-it-all thing. It means at the end of the day, there's going to be some form of super alliance or a coalition of political parties, but in reality there is the ethnic parties or ethnic blocks that are going to play in this. So you cannot wish this away. It's perhaps not, it's the unsaid effects of the census. When the data comes out, eventually political mandarins and players will use it to their advantage or disadvantage.
Muthiora, you have the last say on this census conversation.
Yes, we downplayed the issue about privacy laws, but it's a very important component in this. We live in Kenya, and if you've had a phone for the last 10 years, you know there are times you have received messages that clearly profiled you. Where they got that information, we all know your guess is as good as mine, that they breached some information that had been provided on a certain platform, most probably government information. Now, my brother here comes from a very cosmopolitan constituency, and I love the way that he does his politics and leadership. His tribe is not the majority in that constituency, but then he ascended to office. Now, if someone else, such as him, wants to win, and they take the angle that most Kenyan politicians do, they could use this census information, now that we have tribe right there, and divide those communities to fight against themselves, so that hapo katikati they get into office. That's why I still believe, given our past history, and it's not a distant one, tribe at this point is still a divisive matter. Let us celebrate the good things about our diversity and culture, but clearly putting down information about our ethnicity, given the laws that we have, that information is going to be abused.
All right. And of course, the conversation continues on census. It continues until the 31st of August. As soon as you're enumerated, do let us know. Let's just take a look at what you are talking about on Twitter before we transition to the next topic. If you can have that, or what you've been saying at Citizen TV Kenya. Ali Dayeb 7, Wajir, not only me, but the whole neighborhood not counted. We are wondering, must we have connections to be counted?
Okay, this is still on Twitter. We're just asking you guys this morning how that has been going on for you. So Chiriot, you're saying, I obeyed Matiang'i's order, stayed home for 2 days, but I was not enumerated.
Well, Cabinet Secretary Matiang'i. Okay, on SMS, Sir Nixon Dugiro from Kindaruma, it's very unfortunate that I traveled home to be counted, but in vain. Hasara Tupu, and was still not yet counted.
Okay,
so an important travel.
Yes.
Why did he have to travel? They were told, be counted where you are.
Abel, you're watching from Eldoret. Good morning. You say, I haven't been counted, but I think the census officials are being creative by dragging their feet, hoping for extension of the exercise.
Oh, really? Could they do that? Someone else on SMS, 22422, this is from Vihiga. I have been waiting and even sleeping past midnight for the last 2 days, but have not been counted. So sorry, you don't leave your name, but you're from Vihiga. So, of course, there are those sentiments that some people were asked by their political leaders in their home counties to travel home to get counted.